An 11-year-old boy named Randall Conklin approached 17-year-old Michael Turpin, a promising high school athlete, and fatally shot him at point-blank range in front of horrified onlookers. The midday attack sent families scrambling for cover as gunfire echoed across the normally peaceful grounds. Randall, a fifth grader at nearby Lincoln Elementary School, had concealed a 9mm handgun in his Spider-Man backpack, walking directly up to Michael, who sat on a bench near the basketball courts. This area was known locally as a boundary between rival gang territories. The small shooter, described by witnesses as eerily calm, fired without hesitation before tucking the weapon away and walking, not running from the scene, left behind the body of a teenage boy and a community in shock. The shooting occurred in the east section of Balboa Park, 200-acre urban cultural park, mostly known for its museums, gardens, and the famous San Diego Zoo. However, certain areas had become contested territory between rival gangs seeking to control drug sales. The invisible boundary lines of these territories were known only to gang members, but completely invisible to the tourists and families who frequented the park, creating a dangerous overlap of recreational space and criminal enterprise. What made this crime particularly shocking wasn't just the violence itself, but the age of the perpetrator. Local law enforcement had noticed an alarming trend of younger recruits being brought into gangs. But few could have predicted that elementary school children were being enlisted as soldiers in this urban war. Who was Randall Conklin? Randall Conklin did not fit the stereotype many would expect of a juvenile killer. He came from a middle-class home in a relatively safe neighborhood called North Park, had no previous arrests, and was described by teachers as quiet but well-behaved. His divorced parents both worked full-time jobs, with Randall often left unsupervised during the critical after-school hours when he should have been in childcare or organized activities. This lack of oversight created a vacuum that was filled by older boys in his neighborhood who belonged to the West Side Locos, a gang that had recently begun recruiting younger members to carry out tasks that would result in minimal legal consequences due to their age. Randall had been seen hanging around known gang members in the months prior to the shooting, but neither his parents nor his teachers had recognized the danger signs of his new associations. His fifth-grade teacher described him as quiet, academically gifted, and well-behaved with no disciplinary issues and consistently high grades across all subjects. Yet this perception stood in stark contrast to what investigators would later discover about his after-school life, where security camera footage from various locations throughout the city showed Randall in the company of older teens known to be affiliated with the West Side Locos. This dual existence model student by day, gang affiliate by evening had gone completely unnoticed by both school officials and his mother, who worked evening shifts at the hospital 3 days a week.
Ow.
Randall was supposedly supervised by his grandmother during those hours. The investigation would later reveal that this supervision was far less attentive than anyone realized, leaving Randall vulnerable to manipulation by adults who recognized his intelligence and reliability as valuable assets for their criminal enterprise. The victim, Michael Turpin, was a senior at San Diego High School and a star basketball player being scouted by several colleges for athletic scholarships. He had peripheral connections to the East Side Kings, a rival gang to the West Side Locos, primarily through family members. However, according to friends, he had been actively trying to distance himself from those associations to focus on his sports career and education. Michael maintained a 3.4 GPA while starring on his school's basketball team, balancing academics and athletics with a determination that impressed his coaches and teachers alike. His high school basketball coach described Michael as a natural leader who took younger players under his wing and pushed his teammates to excel both on and off the court. College recruitment letters had begun arriving during his junior year, representing not just athletic recognition, but the promise of educational opportunities that could permanently alter his life trajectory. The most recent letter came from UCLA expressing interest in having him visit campus on opportunity Michael had been excitedly planning when his life was violently ended. Michael's journey to becoming a star athlete had not been easy, as his family lived in an area of San Diego where gang influence was strong, and many of his childhood friends had already been pulled into that life. His uncle DeAndre Turpin had been associated with the East Side Kings in his youth, and still maintained loose connections to the gang. Yet Michael knew what that life led to: prison or the cemetery, and he wanted no part of it. He used basketball as his shield, staying in the gym when others were out on the streets, using his talent to create a different path for himself. His best friend since childhood, Jamal Pierce, shared stories of how Michael would wake up at 5 a.m. to practice shooting hoops before school. Michael's girlfriend of 2 years, Brianna Lopez, spoke of his gentleness and his plans for their future. Together, dreams that included college, professional basketball if possible, and eventually returning to their community to mentor other young athletes. The crime scene investigation detective Ryan Thomas, a 15-year veteran of the San Diego Police Department's homicide unit with extensive experience in gang-related crimes, arrived at Balboa Park 20 minutes after the initial emergency calls flooded dispatch. The first thing that struck him was how crowded the park had been. Whoever committed this murder either didn't care about witnesses or wanted the message to be public and unmistakable. The crime scene presented immediate challenges for investigators, as the open-air setting in a heavily trafficked park meant that physical evidence could be easily contaminated or lost amid hundreds of footprints, discarded items, and natural debris. Crime scene technicians methodically photographed and cataloged the scene, placing numbered markers beside potential evidence while detectives began separating and interviewing dozens of witnesses whose accounts varied widely given the chaos and trauma of the moment. Detective Thomas noticed an unusual blood spatter pattern that didn't conform to what would typically be expected from a single gunshot wound to the chest. There was a distinctive void pattern in the blood spatter on the bench behind the victim, suggesting that someone had been standing very close to Michael when he was shot close enough to interrupt the blood spray pattern. That person would almost certainly have been covered with significant blood spatter themselves. This observation would prove crucial as investigators began piecing together the events. Crime scene technicians took extensive samples from the bench and surrounding area, carefully documenting the spatter patterns that would later be analyzed by forensic experts. The murder weapon was not found at the scene, despite an extensive search of trash bins, bushes, and waterways within a half-mile radius. This suggested that the shooter had maintained enough composure to leave with the gun rather than discarding it in panic. Another unusual element pointing to planning not typically associated with juvenile offenders. Security footage breakthrough while the forensic team continued processing physical evidence. Detectives began reviewing security camera footage from the numerous museums, cafes, and facilities scattered throughout Balboa Park. The shooting itself had not been captured on video, but cameras at the Natural History Museum entrance, approximately 100 yards from the crime scene, provided valuable footage of people entering and exiting the park around the time of the murder. During this review process, investigators got their first clear look at a small boy entering the park wearing a distinctive blue and white striped polo shirt, and khaki shorts carrying a Spider-Man backpack that seemed bulkier than would be expected for a child visiting a park. Detective Thomas immediately understood the significance. We need to identify this kid. He enters at 1:55 p.m. and leaves at 2:23 p.m., which puts him in the park during our shooting window. And his exit path would take him right past our crime scene. The same camera caught him leaving 8 minutes after the estimated time of the shooting. His body language noticeably different, more rigid. His path direct and purposeful rather than the meandering route he had taken on his way in. This footage would later become crucial evidence, as it clearly showed the clothing Randall was wearing and his demeanor before and after the murder. What investigators found most disturbing in the immediate aftermath was not just the age of the suspected shooter, but the complete lack of panic in his demeanor, as described by witnesses. Multiple people reported seeing a small boy walk away from the scene like he was leaving a friend's house with no visible distress or urgency that would typically accompany such a traumatic event. This unnatural calmness suggested either a profound lack of understanding about what he had done or, more disturbingly, a complete detachment from the gravity of taking another person's life. Identifying the suspect the morning after the shooting, Detective Ryan Thomas stood before 30 grim-faced school administrators from the San Diego Unified School District. Distributing still images taken from the security footage, he explained that they were looking for a student who matched the description, may have been absent the previous afternoon or shown unusual behavior. The approach was unusual and controversial, involving schools in a murder investigation, especially one potentially targeting a child so young. However, Thomas had secured approval from both his superiors and the district superintendent, given the extraordinary circumstances. Just 3 hours after the school briefing, Thomas's phone rang with a call that would dramatically advance the investigation. "Detective, this is Principal Margaret Chen from Lincoln Elementary School. I think the boy in your photos might be one of our students, Randall Conklin, a 5th grader here." Principal Chen explained that Randall had been absent the previous afternoon, with his grandmother calling to sign him out early for what was described as a dental appointment. More tellingly, Randall's teacher had noticed something unusual that morning. The normally quiet but well-dressed boy had come to school wearing clothes that didn't match and seemed unusually withdrawn, flinching when another student accidentally bumped into him during morning lineup. The age confirmation sent a chill through the experienced detective who had investigated. Hundreds of homicides, but never one with a suspect so young, as protocol for interviewing minors required parental consent and presence. Thomas instructed Principal Chen not to alert Randall or take any special actions that might tip him off. He needed to secure necessary approvals and contact the boy's parents. The search and discovery detective Thomas secured an address for the Conklin family and dispatched officers to locate Randall's parents while he and his partner, Detective Sarah Martinez, headed to Randall's residence with a search warrant, hoping to find the clothing seen in the security footage before it could be destroyed. The Conklin home was located in the modest but well-maintained North Park neighborhood of San Diego, an area not known for gang activity, but close enough to contested territories that influence could easily reach there. No one answered when detectives knocked at the single-story bungalow, allowing them to execute their search warrant without interference. Inside, they found a relatively normal home for a family with a young child. Randall's room was decorated with superhero posters. His desk had school materials neatly arranged, and his closet contained carefully organized clothing. "This kid is meticulous," Detective Martinez observed as they searched the room, noting how Randall's school uniforms were arranged by day of the week. In the bathroom connected to Randall's bedroom, detectives made their first significant discovery. A damp blue and white striped polo shirt and khaki shorts were stuffed into the back of the cabinet under the sink, partially hidden behind cleaning supplies. "The clothes are still wet," Thomas noted as he carefully placed each item into separate evidence bags. "The shirt has been scrubbed with something harsh, maybe bleach. Based on the discoloration around the collar and chest, Detective Martinez examined the bathroom sink and found traces of what appeared to be diluted blood in the drain trap and faint reddish-brown smudges on a hand towel discarded in the hamper. He had tried to clean up in here, not in the main laundry room, she observed. That suggests he didn't want his parents to know what he was doing. Incriminating evidence in the bedroom, while the clothing was the most significant find. Detectives also discovered a shoebox pushed to the back of Randall's closet shelf that contained items suggesting gang affiliation. Inside was a blue bandana, several crude drawings of gang symbols associated with the West Side Locos, a small notebook with what appeared to be a tally of points next to different activities. Some were innocuous, like tagged wall, but others were deeply disturbing, like carried package and lookout duty. The final entry, dated September 23rd, the day of the murder, simply read, "Proved loyalty," with 5 stars drawn next to it. "He was keeping score," Detective Martinez said quietly, flipping through the pages. "It's like it was a video game or something." The notebook and other items were carefully cataloged and added to the growing collection of evidence that would connect Randall Conklin to both the murder and the gang-related motive behind it. The Spider-Man backpack visible in the security footage was located in Randall's bedroom closet. Unlike the clothing, the backpack showed no signs of having been cleaned or tampered with. Its contents appeared routine for a 5th grader school books, a lunch container, pencil case, and a water bottle. "The gun isn't here," Detective Thomas confirmed after a thorough search of the bag and the entire house. "Either he passed it off to someone else after the shooting, or it was never stored here to begin with." This missing piece of evidence suggested adult involvement in the crime, as an 11-year-old would have limited ability to independently acquire and dispose of a firearm. A background investigation into the Conklin family revealed several concerning connections that would prove crucial to understanding Randall's exploitation and recruitment. Family connections to the gang. Randall's parents had divorced 3 years earlier. With his father, Daniel Conklin, now living in another part of San Diego, records showed Daniel Conklin had 2 prior arrests for drug possession and, more significantly, was the cousin of Jason J. Rock Sullivan, is a known high-ranking member of the West Side Locos, currently serving time for assault and weapon charges. This family connection provided the first tangible link between Randall and the gang suspected of orchestrating the park shooting, suggesting that Randall's involvement might have been facilitated through his father's family ties rather than through traditional recruitment channels that would typically target older youth. Cell phone records told a damning story revealing numerous calls between Daniel Conklin and known West Side Locos members in the weeks leading up to the shooting, including 3 calls on the morning of the murder itself, followed by a complete cessation of contact immediately after. The most revealing breakthrough in establishing the gang connection came from examining Randall's own possessions, specifically the notebook found in his bedroom with its point-based tracking system for various activities. Detectives consulted with Dr. Manuel Ortiz, a criminologist specializing in juvenile gang recruitment, who identified the notebook as an example of a technique increasingly used to indoctrinate younger children into gang activities. It's modeled after video game achievement systems, Dr. Ortiz explained. These kids are being given missions with point values, creating a gamified path toward gang membership that appeals to children who've grown up with digital reward systems. The progression is deliberate, starting with minor vandalism, moving to serving as lookouts, and carrying packages, which are likely drugs, and culminating in the final mission marked Proved Loyalty, almost certainly the shooting itself, interrogation, and confession. At 4:15 p.m., Randall Conklin arrived at the San Diego Police Department's Central Division, accompanied by his visibly distraught mother and 2 officers. The small boy, dwarfed by the adult-sized chair in the interview room, showed little emotion as Detective Thomas explained the special procedures required for interviewing a juvenile. When Detective Thomas confronted Randall with the physical evidence, particularly the luminol-rivaled blood on his clothing, Randall's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly for the first time. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and his right hand twitched before he could control it. "The luminol test doesn't lie, Randall," Thomas continued. "It shows us what you tried to wash away. I need you to tell me how Michael's blood got on your shirt." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute, broken only by the sound of Rebecca Conklin's muffled sobbing. Finally, Randall said, "I want to talk to my dad. I need to ask him what to do." This request revealed both his continued dependence on his father's guidance and suggested Daniel Conklin's involvement in directing the crime. When the interview resumed, Detective Thomas took a different approach, focusing not on whether Randall had committed the act, but on his motivation. "Oh, the park belongs to us," Randall finally said, his voice quiet but suddenly more childlike than at any previous point. "That's what they told me." Mail was on the wrong side. He was wearing the wrong colors in our territory. The statement was delivered with the simplified logic of a child repeating an adult's justification. "Dad said I needed to be a soldier, that I had to protect our territory because no one would expect someone like me. He said I'd be a hero to the set." The forensic evidence mounts Dr. Eleanor Chang, the San Diego Police Department's lead forensic analyst, approached the witness stand with the measured confidence of someone who had testified in hundreds of trials. As the prosecution's key scientific witness, her testimony would provide the jury with the technical foundation for understanding the blood evidence that formed the cornerstone of the case against the 11-year-old defendant. "Blood spatter analysis is essentially the study of blood in motion," she began. "When blood is acted upon by force, such as the impact of a bullet, it creates distinctive patterns depending on the type of force applied, the distance from the source, and the angle of impact." With the courtroom lights dimmed, Dr. Chang displayed photographs of Randall Conklin's blue and white striped polo shirt under luminol testing. The constellation of revealed blood droplets glowed in eerie blue against the fabric. Despite Randall's attempt to wash the shirt, the blood proteins had bonded with the fabric fibers in a way that made complete removal impossible. Without destroying the garment itself, luminol reveals these blood proteins even after washing, allowing us to see what the naked eye cannot. With methodical precision, Dr. Chang walked the jury through her analysis process, explaining how the pattern on Randall's shirt was consistent with someone standing approximately 2 feet in front of the victim when the fatal shot was fired. This was exactly the position witnesses had described, seeing a small boy standing from Michael Turpin just before the shooting. Furthermore, DNA analysis confirmed with absolute scientific certainty that this blood belonged to Michael Turpin with a statistical probability of error less than 1 in 1 trillion. This conclusive scientific evidence linking Randall directly to the shooting appeared to have a visible impact on several jurors who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Expert testimony on child development. The defense's case centered on testimony from Dr. Sarah Levine, a developmental neuropsychologist specializing in childhood brain development. She provided the scientific foundation for understanding Randall's limited capacity to form the mental state required for the charges he faced. The brain develops from back to front, Dr. Levine explained, using a three-dimensional model to illustrate her points. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control, consequence assessment, and moral reasoning, is quite literally the last part of the brain to develop. It's not reaching maturity until the mid-20s. In an 11-year-old like Randall, this region is profoundly underdeveloped, making children this age neurologically incapable of the same level of reasoning, judgment, and impulse control that we expect from adults or even older adolescents. Dr. Levine's testimony became particularly relevant when she addressed the concept of death understanding in children Randall's age. Research consistently shows that complete understanding of death as permanence, what we call death, irreversibility, is and fully developed in many children until age 12 or older. Children Randall's age often still hold magical thinking about death, believing on some level that it might be reversible or temporary, similar to characters in video games who can be respawned or brought back to life. This is not a failure of morality, but a normal developmental stage. When asked directly whether Randall could have fully understood that shooting Michael Turpin would permanently end his life, Dr. Levine responded, based on both the scientific research on developmental psychology and my clinical evaluation of Randall, it's highly unlikely that he possessed the cognitive capacity to fully comprehend the permanence and totality of his actions, especially given how adults deliberately framed the act in video game terminology that further blurred the line between fantasy violence and real-world consequences. The verdict and sentencing. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as the jury filed back in after just 4 hours of deliberation. The jury foreperson stood with the verdict form in hand. The tension in courtroom 3B was palpable. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Randall Conklin guilty of murder in the second degree, the foreperson read. The charge carried a maximum sentence of 15 years to life in California, though for a juvenile defendant this would be served in youth facilities until adulthood with numerous opportunities for earlier release through rehabilitation programs. Randall showed little visible reaction to the verdict, his face maintaining the same carefully controlled expression he had displayed throughout much of the trial, though those seated closest to him reported seeing his hands tremble slightly. Judge Martinez's sentencing decision reflected the unique circumstances of the case, balancing the need for accountability with recognition of Randall's age and the extensive adult manipulation that had led to the crime. Randall Conklin. This court sentences you to a term of 12 years in the California Youth Authority with eligibility for earlier release upon demonstration of rehabilitation and completion of educational and therapeutic programs. Judge Martinez announced. Randall would remain in juvenile facilities until at least age 18, with any subsequent incarceration to be determined by periodic review of his progress and ongoing psychological evaluation. The judge mandated comprehensive mental health treatment, educational support, and complete separation from all family members implicated in the gang activity that had led to his manipulation. Unexpected moment of grace before concluding the sentencing, Judge Martinez took the unusual step of directly addressing Randall in age-appropriate language. A moment occurred that hadn't been scripted or anticipated by anyone involved in the proceedings. Randall suddenly turned toward the gallery where Tasha Turpin, Michael's mother, sat watching with quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the trial. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking with what appeared to be genuine emotion, breaking through the conditioned detachment he had displayed for so long. "I didn't understand, but I do now. I'm sorry I took him away from you." The spontaneous apology delivered in the unguarded voice of the child Randall still was beneath the weight of his actions, brought tears to the eyes of many in the courtroom, including several jurors who had returned to witness the sentencing. Tasha Turpin's response was equally unplanned and equally powerful. Rising from her seat, she nodded once in acknowledgement of Randall's apology, her expression conveying both the grief that would never leave her and a recognition of the tragedy that had engulfed this child as well. "I forgive you, Randall," she said clearly, though her voice trembled with emotion. "But but I will never forgive the adults who put that gun in your hand. This exchange between the mother of the victim and the child who had killed her son captured the complex human reality beneath the legal proceedings. The irrevocable harm done, the recognition of manipulation and exploitation, and the possibility, however fragile, of healing and redemption even in the aftermath of terrible violence. Legacy and transformation 5 years after the shooting that claimed Michael Turpin's life and forever altered. Randall Conklin's childhood, the eastern section of Balboa Park, had been transformed from contested gang territory into a community peace garden dedicated to youth violence prevention and reconciliation. Where basketball courts had once stood witness to a shocking act of violence carried out by a child manipulated by adults, carefully tended flower beds, meditation spaces, and a central memorial fountain now created a sanctuary designed to honor Michael's memory while promoting healing and reflection. The Michael Turpin Memorial Garden had been created through a partnership between the Turpin family, local community organizations, and surprisingly, the Juvenile Rehabilitation Center where Randall Conklin continued to serve his sentence with young offenders participating in the design and initial planting as part of their restorative justice programming. Tasha Turpin had followed through on her offer to meet with Randall through a restorative justice program, designed to bring victims and offenders together in structured therapeutic settings. Their relationship had gradually developed into a cautious mentorship, evolving into a collaborative project, a curriculum for elementary schools designed to help young children recognize and resist gang recruitment tactics. The Michael Turpin Protection Program, as it had been named, had been piloted in 10 San Diego elementary schools with plans for county-wide implementation the following academic year, creating an unexpected legacy that sought to prevent similar tragedies by addressing the vulnerability of children to adult exploitation. State legislators had passed the Michael Turpin Child Protection Act, mandating enhanced screening for gang influence in elementary schools, creating new criminal penalties for adults who recruited children under 14 for criminal activities, and funding after-school programs in high-risk neighborhoods. From the darkest soil of collective failure to protect children, something meaningful had grown, not erasing the tragedy, but transforming it into protection and hope for future generations.